Hello, and welcome back to Spiritual Context for Worldly Chaos. We continue on with Siddarth's conversation in this follow-up interview that Jessica and I just did with Siddarth a couple of weeks ago. Jessica and I had a great time asking Siddarth more questions about intuition and the mind, so we hope you enjoy this deeper look into how we communicate with symbology, with each other, and with the universe as a whole. Just a quick reminder for anybody who loves astrology and you want to keep up to date with what's happening in the sky, you are more than welcome to subscribe to my Substack, where I send out a weekly email every Sunday, letting everyone know what major transits are happening in the sky, what retrogrades, full moon, new moon, eclipses, and so on. It will evolve over time, but right now it is kind of a calendar for everyone. All right, let's get on with the interview. Welcome back, Siddharth Ramakrishnan. Hi, Siddarth. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on again.
Yeah, absolutely. And you see that I am with another person this time. I am with my producer, Jessica.
Hello.
Amazing. So what have you been up to since I spoke to you in 2023?
Wow, it's been that long.
Yes, it has been that long.
Wow. So my book, The Neuroscience of Tarot, came out in 2024. That was in November 24. And the whole of last year, I've been learning that just writing a book is not enough. You have to market it. So a lot of it has been like, okay, what am I doing about marketing? And even though it's from Llewellyn, even if they're helping me. So it's been trying to do that a lot. But I've also been writing another book, which is coming out in the fall of this year. That's going to be on the neuroscience of magic. And it's about setting intentions, the brain wiring behind setting intentions, spell work, rituals. Why does every culture have rituals? And then sacred spaces and sacred objects. So why does a piece of wood become a magic wand? Or why does your dining room suddenly become like a magical circle? So how does your brain reframe these things? It's kind of walking you through all of that. So that's coming out in the fall. So I'm very excited about that.
That's amazing. And yeah, I've read a little bit of the book. I've been meaning to read the whole thing because even the last time I re-listened to our interview together, and it was incredible how much information you had that correlates so well to the esoteric side. I don't think that most of us think you can so easily translate it like that. You definitely are probably one of the only people who can translate that so well. So when I was reading your book and listening to our last interview, what we talked a lot about was intuition and how we experience it in our brain. And the 5 days leading up to this interview, everyone's going to hear your interview again, so we don't have to go over exactly what we talked about. But listening to it again, I didn't actually ask you, is it with intuition that we are fighting against? Because I think a lot of the generalized idea of people who go to see a psychic or who consult tarot cards is that it's woo-woo. It's a little out there. It's weird. And intuition has been still kind of played off as magic, or magic that isn't terribly real. So I was wondering, since we all have intuition, what is it that we're fighting against inside of ourselves to kind of push it down, or to say that's not what it is, or to stay in the analytical mind, to push away these gut feelings or the emotional sensations? I was just, in your idea, like what is it what do we gain from that?
Yeah, I think we are wired for intuition, but I also want to say that intuition is not instinct. Instinct is something that you are born with, and intuition is something you get better at with over time. They say kids who are about 5 or 6 is when you start to hone in on your intuition. Like somebody's telling you, if you do it this way, or if these things, when you feel like a certain heaviness in your stomach, that means you're feeling upset, or, you're kind of putting cues together. And then over time, you learn to trust your body about making those decisions. And when you're asking about why are we pushing it down, or why do we have to go to rely on somebody else, I would probably say that especially right now in our modern world, we are not aware of our own body and our own physical self. We try to do that disconnect. We do meditation, but maybe it's like, oh, I'm going to run to my meditation class and do like, that thing, and then you forget about it. And I think that in order to become better at your own intuitive self, you need to start trusting your body work a little bit more. Where am I feeling my anxiety? What decision allowed me to release my anxiety and things like that? So that's one aspect of it, becoming more bodily aware and realizing where in your body do you feel happiness, or where in your body do you feel sadness or the tension. The other part is because we are in such a fast-paced world, we don't reflect back on if you made an intuitive decision and you had a certain outcome and it wasn't what you expected. Are you reflecting back to see, hey, what patterns did I look around to make that particular decision? Or did I trust my body enough? Or did I not trust my body enough? We don't give pause to kind of go back and say, why did I do what I do? And that's the only way you get better at it. People who are working, say, in the field of medicine have to do that. They have to say, I did this surgery, I did this thing, and it worked out. So what were the things that my brain was recognizing that led me to go down that path? Or my surgery didn't work out, so why was my intuition failing? So I go back and perfect it. So when you're in a position like that, where you're a doctor or you're an athlete who needs to perform on a high level, we tend to become more body aware. We tend to become more reflective on our intuitive practices, but that needs to extend to all of us on some level. We all need to kind of reflect back on what makes me a good intuitive, and that's the only way we get better at it.
So this is kind of like self-care and self-mastery.
Yeah, definitely. Almost a way for you to train yourself into becoming better at your decision making and trusting your gut almost. Like you just mentioned that, trusting your gut and to recognize like what is my body saying, or what is my brain saying. Just take a pause and kind of recognize that and realize from it. So
does that resonate at all with do you know human design?
No.
So it's a like a self-discovery modality that uses chakras, I Ching, and astrology, and I think those are like the three. But so it combines these ideas, and it's focused around body centers. And there's a couple authorities, like emotional authority, a splenic authority. But there's this concept that I was learning about as a splenic authority. It's that gut, that the spleen is a decision-making center that relies on chemicals, like it's the chemicals in the body that interact with the chemicals outside of the body. And there was something within that concept when I was learning about it that it explained in this society, we are conditioned to believe that the head rules decision making, that like logic rules decision making, and like that is sort of something to be walked back under the premise of getting in touch with your body and getting in touch with hearing those really quiet chemicals that engage with the world around us. Is that kind of...
Yeah, in a way, what you're saying is right. Like if you cut your head off and you have your brain, it can still be working, but without that body to respond to, it really means nothing, right? So one of the things that the book talks about is, for a long time, people were thinking emotions and the way you felt about anything in the world was arising from the brain. It was a very cerebral thing. I feel angry, I feel sad.
Mm-hmm.
But more and more scientists are looking towards physiological responses. So if when you face something, maybe your heart beats faster or your lung capacity becomes better. And that is then interpreted by your brain as, hey, my heart is doing this, my lung is doing this. This means I feel this way. So your brain is more of a labeler of how your body is processing things. If there's a disconnect between that labeling of the body and the brain, that's when you start getting into mental disorders, where I need to be feeling this way, but I don't feel happy. I need to be feeling anxious at this moment, but I feel indifferent. So that when that cross-labeling happens is when you're missing that. So on some level, what you're saying is on point, because you need to have the brain as an interpreter of your body in order to feel different things around you.
And that's that mind-body connection.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's that sense of I know myself, right? Because intuition, if it's self-care as well, and reflective self-care. So I got myself into a similar relationship that I did before. How did I get myself there? And so that's consciously building the intuition around whatever subject you want to build it around. But this also implies that you have to have a lot of humility in order to open up to something like that, because it's saying, I don't technically know, or maybe if it's a surgery, I knew, but now I'm reinforcing what I knew, right? And it's kind of maybe getting you to a place where you're able to want to maybe change the way that you approach things, or at least support new ideas, new beliefs, like shaving off neurons in order to build new neurons. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, a part of it is because we are relying a lot on our external senses of the sight and sound and all that, and we're forgetting that we have sensors within your lungs, sensors in your gut, and both for mechanical movements and also chemical signals. And there's a whole area of the brain, the insula, that's devoted just for that underlying unconscious sensation that's constantly going on. But it doesn't always have to be completely unconscious. It's good that it's unconscious, because if I'm constantly thinking about how my stomach is moving, then I'm not going to be able to function. But if you start and pause and say, okay, this happened to me, how fast is my heart beating right now? If I start thinking about that every day for a whole 2 weeks, you will start be able to know exactly how fast your heart is beating at some point. So having that in your toolbox almost of your repertoire of trusting your internal self is going to be a big part of how you're going to be responding to the external world. Because intuitive decision making a lot of times is happening very quickly on some level, because you don't want to go logical step by step, hey, this happened, so this happened. If you start doing that, then you kind of go into a different framework. So in order for you to go through the intuitive thing, you really need to trust yourself on a certain level. So to get to that automated part, you really need to become more self-aware. On a physical plane, maybe.
That reminds me of becoming aware on a physical plane. It's like the idea of you can think, but your body you don't actually learn anything.
Mm-hmm.
Like we learn things through experience.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And something about intuition that I want to bring up that I think is maybe a misnomer, or maybe one reason somebody might go to a psychic instead of trusting their own intuition, is that intuition always leads you to the right answer. I don't think that that's true necessarily, but you said it in our last interview that it brings about cognitive ease.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I'm curious, what is it that we're dealing with when maybe a lot of us don't trust our intuition because we're assuming like it has to either be completely right or we're being completely misled.
Mm-hmm.
And cognitive ease it doesn't sound like an easy navigational director, because it's like, well, if it feels good and easy, then how is this the right thing? I'm curious what you think about all that.
Yeah. So the reason we have intuition is because we need to make very quick decisions. So when humans have evolved, so if you're faced with a lion and you need to quickly make a decision whether I'm going to run away or I'm going to stay and fight or just freeze, right? You need to make very quick on-the-spot decisions with not enough information around you. And that's kind of the whole part of this is our brain is taking in a lot of unconscious information. So when you're faced with a conflict or any kind of situation, if you never make a decision, you're going to be paralyzed and stuck in one spot. So you have this intuitive processing in order for you to make a quick decision to move one way or the other. That resolution of that conflict in that point is giving you that cognitive ease. So I'm no longer in that conflicted position because I've made a decision to move forward one way or the other. It might not be the right choice in the long run, but in that moment of time, it was a way forward, which is no longer causing your brain to have that, oh my God, I need to make that decision at this point. It's like just taking an exam and you have to answer the question and you're picking the first answer that comes to your head. Sometimes that works, but sometimes it doesn't. And so your intuitive guesses might not always be the right one. Yeah.
Well, then that's also the question between like, how do you tell the difference between intuition, anxiety, hypervigilance, because in those moments of stress, probably all of them arise at once. And now you're kind of Russian roulette almost. Maybe you feel like, okay, do I go with what makes me feel more at ease, which also might be a bit of a threat because it's like, relaxed into a false state of peace.
Mm-hmm.
Or hypervigilance, it's, I've got to always, maybe it's an overdrive of intuition where you're taking in way too much information in order to make a decision. And anxiety, would you call that the paralysis? Would you call that where somebody is freezing?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And in fact, there are these interoceptive tests that you can do to assess what kind of emotions do you react to intuitively. Like, do you feel some people actually are much more aware of how they react when they are anxious. Some people are actually much more aware of how they feel when they are happy. Not all of us are kind of built the same. So there is a test called Maya, like MAIA, which is a multisensory aware interoceptive test that's there that kind of helps you kind of walk through. And then by taking that, you kind of know how do you normally respond to different situations and what physical cues do you use in order to respond to? Where in your body do you feel these things? It's actually a really interesting way to assess yourself. And I ask my students to do that in class here. And it's really interesting to see what people come up with.
Well, and you also talk about that intuition is, you read it through your body, right? Like that's what we've been talking about. It's not as much your cognitive efforts as it is through the sensations and maybe that they're being delivered to your brain and then, other things happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I've read somewhere, and I'm curious your take on this, that emotions, so there's feelings and feelings are like this pure natural body state. And emotions are the stories that go along with that feeling. So the feelings are what puts demands on your mind to do something, to make those decisions, to maybe utilize intuition in order to move forward. So would you say that, like, let's use a surgeon, for example, being in like a flow state where everything does feel calm, where the emotions that are communicating with your mind to get it to do something are in tandem. Is that a really good sign that you are leading with your intuition?
Yeah, so the intuition is processed in an area of your brain called the caudate nucleus, and three main things feed into it. One are your memories. So you might have encountered things in the past, or you've kind of gone through this makes me happy, or this makes me sad, or this makes me, it doesn't have to be the same situation, but you've experienced things before. So those are the memories that are there. And then, as you mentioned, your emotions. So what did this particular thing make you feel? What in your ideal world is happiness? Those kinds of things, the emotions are there, those stories. But also depends on your current frame of mind, which is kind of right up here in your orbitofrontal cortex. So it's kind of saying, at this moment in time, how am I feeling? So because that's also going to influence like how you're going to react to something at this point of time. And I guess that's why, people put headphones in and listen to music, before they go in for a long surgery, or when an athlete goes on, they kind of put like these headphones on, and to kind of come into that state of mind where you are kind of removing a lot of the other distractions or biases, so you're able to react much more or become more aware of how you want to react to situations. Yeah, you got that.
Oh, and I loved where you pointed to, which is the third eye or the sixth chakra, right, is the state of mind. And when you read about the sixth chakra, the deficiency of it, or the when it's more closed down or having an issue, it's hard for you to see the truth, or it's hard for you to see what it is that your state of mind is, that you might be a little bit more, either more masked up or more, out of control of what the state of mind is. I think also what's interesting is in your next book, you're talking about ritual, and that is a part of the state of mind, right? Like putting yourself into kind of a state of mind. Do you think magic is a method to make the unconscious conscious through ritual?
Yeah. So first of all, it was interesting to me to do research on this book is there's a whole concept of magical thinking, the actual belief in magic, and we all are wired for it. And we kind of are wired for it as kids. And then over time, we kind of socially it's kind of broken down as to, it doesn't exist, and you kind of are paired away from it. The ritual, yes. So a lot of rituals is around the fact that our world or our lives are uncertain. So rituals are a lot of times are prescriptive and saying, you do this and then you do this and then you do this. So it's a very prescribed format of things. So on some level, you can tune out the thinking aspect of things and say, okay, I need to do this next and this next and this next. And if especially with the elaborate rituals, that might get you into that flow that you were talking about, because you're kind of moving into a state of where your mind can then think about the supernatural, or your mind can think about an external power or an agency. So you're kind of allowing or creating the space for bringing in those thoughts. And that is what rituals really, really help you with.
I've been looking into discipline tactics for neurodivergence, and there's this framework that's coming up a lot around using ritual. It's not the term, they're not using the term ritual, but that's sort of the container that I'm working on building, and it's in order to expand your capacity and to expand your bandwidth through ritual, through like meaning making, like building containers mentally where you're externalizing information in order to build capacity at your current state. So what you just said kind of resonates with me.
Yeah, that sounds really amazing. I never thought about the neurodivergent aspect of things, but that completely makes sense, because again, you're just reducing the level of uncertainty around you to try and focus on like little details. And when you're focusing on the little details, like just like drawing a mandala or something, you're so into like drawing those little details that it then allows your brain to other parts of your brain to kind of think about or expand into different concepts or horizons.
Yeah, to sort of wander into creativity and expression and cool.
Yeah.
I really like that you brought that up too, because I deal with neurodivergence. I think a lot of us do. And one of the things that's hardest for me is to let go of the comfort of chaos. And chaos for me is like a sense of freedom. I can do what I want, when I want, how I want, but at the same time, I lose all of time. I don't feel satiated at the end of the day. I don't feel like a goal that I have is being actually met. It's just sort of being pushed around in my life, I was wondering, like, this ritual or with discipline, I think that's a really great cross-referenced word, do you find that for someone to get into that flow state, they have to tackle their chaos first, or is it something that you can have in tandem, that it maybe has its own spontaneity with it, or is it intuition really just this kind of calm state, or can it be flashes as well?
So the Buddhists talk about flashes of insight, like it's called abhisamaya. It kind of hits you like a lightning bolt. It comes like out of nowhere, right? And sometimes we experience that in the shower, or when you're washing dishes. So a lot of times they say you don't have to have a whole prescribed ritual, like a huge thing. It's more about just doing a mundane task which requires you to be in, say, one space physically without like walking around, and then doing something where you're engaged with it but not completely engaged with it. And that might be the perfect place for you to get those bolts of insight that just percolate from nowhere. And then similarly, the mandala drawing, or like in Hinduism, we call them yantra drawings, where we kind of draw those geometric shapes in specific patterns over and over again. Those are really good for getting into that flow state of mind, which is allowing you to get into that groove, to allow the intuition to percolate, and you get that insight from there. The idea is, how can you go from that unconscious knowledge to the conscious knowledge, and how are you going to get from down here to up here is kind of going to be the big thing over there. Yeah.
So then what about magic? I'd like to, I don't think I've directly talked to anybody about magic, because my podcast before was mainly about tarot, and tarot has its own place in magic, but magic in general is kind of coming from the void, right? It's whatever is percolating up that you are putting out there. And if it's a ritual of some kind, that ritual has an end, especially say like a spell ritual or something like that, or a daily practice or mantras or affirmations. They have some kind of end goal, even if it's a broad end goal. How do you decide what's best for you? Let's say with affirmations, what's going to hit the most because I think that's got to be an intuitive thing too, because it's in your body, you're feeling where it is in your body. But I think what is really coveted in the magical thinking or the affirming idea is the belief, right? Getting really down to that belief and being able to find that belief. How do you think intuition would do that?
There is a part of your brain that deals with belief, that there are two different aspects, right? One is the self-belief and the other is the belief in like a higher power or an external agency, or, there are two different aspects. And the self-belief comes a lot from your sense of self, of your what is called your default mode network. What do I think about me? Who am I? And that's the part that quietens down a lot when you're meditating. You're kind of removing the ego from things. And then the other part is your belief in some external agency, which is kind of right over here, your temporoparietal junction, which is kind of between the top half of your brain and the one on the side. And right in that juncture is where sometimes it's called theory of mind. It's where you can say the universe made me do it, or this God is responding to me and things like that. And it's actually really important because that's the only way we recognize someone else. The fact that I can give you agency and say, oh, you can actually do something which is different than what I am doing is part of that part of the brain. But we're using the same area to attribute agency to something outside of us as well. In magical thinking, we're kind of putting these together on some level, that this external agency can influence in me. And part of that belief is interesting is because they're saying that when you're saying I want this to happen, I want to manifest this particular thing, and you're having that intention, the more personal your intention gets, the physiological responses also happen. So in a lot of these visualization things, they ask you to feel, if you get this thing, how will it make you feel? Right? And you're not going to just say, I'm going to feel happy. Rather, if you feel, I'm getting this piece, this object, and that's going to make my heart beat faster, and you actually feel that in your body, then that is what your brain really responds to. And that makes your intention much more powerful. So that is the key part of this manifestation, or magic, as you might call it, where you kind of need to have that personal attribution that's going on. The other thing you need to dampen down there is the sense of disbelief that your brain is always going to pop up with, saying, hey, this is not logical, this is all like, BS that people are talking about. So you kind of have to have a way to dampen down that aspect of things. You're in your anterior cingulate cortex, you kind of dampen it down, and that together, both the personalization to make it more exciting for you, as well as the dampening down of the disbelief, together kind of lead you to the path of actually setting an intention that can work out or manifest itself. And that's kind of what is the root of magic, is what I feel.
That's a beautiful way of hearing the root of magic in a neurological way.
Do you ever feel kind of like you are your own puppet and puppeteer because you know your brain so intricately? Do you ever see yourself doing things and know you can just pull some strings and adjust anything?
No, for a long time. So my mom is an artist and my dad is a doctor. So for a long time, I was like, I have absolutely no control over what I am, because it's kind of this byproduct of you can call it genetics, upbringing, whatever it is, right? So there had to be a confluence on some things on some level. It's kind of, so I really had no control over that. It was something I was thinking. And then there's one way of interpreting the word karma in Hindu philosophy is, your past births and all the stuff that you did that's now influencing your current birth. But there's a different way of thinking about the word of karma, which is every single decision point and every single life circumstance that has led you to this particular moment in time. So the choice is really not a choice, because everything has kind of led to this particular point, that the way forward is only this way. If you can think of it that way, that's another way to look at karma. It's like every single thing that's happened in your life that's led you to this particular moment, which is leading you down to that next moment in time, and so on and so forth. And I can pinpoint events in my life, looking back, that have just happened without me like manipulating it or thinking about it. And looking back, I can see those pivotal things that are happening, and I have no explanation for why that happened, right? And I think on some level you have to trust in the world around you, or maybe even become aware of those moments when they're happening. There's a story I say in my book where I was in Chicago waiting to cross this huge avenue, and I was not sure if I was going to cross the road or go kind of continue walking along the same sidewalk. And suddenly this old woman came and grabbed my hand and said, "I need help crossing the road." And then she led me across the road. She needed no help. She grabbed my hand and she proceeded to cross the road. She dragged me across the road. And I'm like, what's going on? And then she made me cross the road. And I was, as it was happening, I'm thinking, she really didn't need me. She's physically able, but I was in this moment of decision time. It wasn't like a huge decision-making thing. It was just like a crossing the road, right? Should I go left or right kind of stuff? But she made that decision for me. And I constantly feel like that really changed, like a butterfly effect, right? Like something changed. So I think allowing yourself to have those moments, whether they are inconsequential or consequential, and noticing them, I think I tend to do that. I tend to look for those moments and I tend to be aware of them. And I think a lot of people maybe go through life without noticing those moments. So, yeah. Sorry, that was a very weird way of answering your question. But
no, yeah, you're the puppet, the puppeteer, and the audience, and also the composer and the listener.
Exactly. One-man band. Exactly. I think let's call magical thinking also manifestation, so that I'm not completely dancing around that idea as well, because that's what a lot of people call it, law of attraction. I think I get into that a lot in survival mode. So when I have to, like, not even just have to make a decision, like there's a brick wall or there's forward, and then all these little decisions that I make in between will get hyper intensely intuitive. Like this apartment that I got, that's beautiful. That was all on intuition. I knew I was going to land somewhere that I wanted to land. I was like, if there's going to be a brick wall behind me, I might as well sketch out how this whole apartment's going to look. It ended up looking exactly like that. And it had even more stuff in it that I didn't put on the list because I thought it would be too much, But I was pushed into this position that I then just decided it was not easy the whole time. It was more like trying to chain myself to something so that I don't make a decision outside of my intuition. But it was rolling with all the punches that happened with it and saying, if this is, I believe in the end result of this. I believe that that's where I'm going to land, regardless of how long it takes, regardless of how scary this may feel, or the finances that I may not have. It's going to happen. And it did happen, but it really does, for me, happen easiest on survivalism. And I'd like it to not happen on survivalism. I'd like it to be more intentional and I just want the thing, not necessarily I have to. What would you say to someone like me who's, and I think a lot of people probably, relate to that. What would you say to someone like me who wants to operate more on abundance than catastrophe, let's say?
So it's almost like two different aspects of your brain are playing off against each other, like the ones that are kind of reacting to the positive aspects and the ones that are reacting to the negative aspects of things, right?
My two wolves, yeah.
So and that is true in the terms of those are like huge, strong balancing forces. I would say, first of all, try and get into a state where you become a little bit more aware of where you feel the abundance and where you feel the happiness. So maybe think of yourself as, I have everything in your world. And if you imagine that in your body, where do you feel that? And see if you can get to that state on a regular basis. I'm not saying every day, maybe just 5 minutes, a week or something. Just think about that. And then from that point, try and see what could lead to that physical state. The way you describe the crisis mode is great because on some level you're pushing your unconscious brain into that intuitive frame because you have to make that thing, and so you're kind of pushing yourself to that. So that's also a strategy that people use. It's almost like There are different management styles, right? You're using a certain thing that works for you. So try and do that. The other thing I would say is play around with the affirmations. So some people, affirmations like I will do this or I will do that works a lot. For some people, the second person affirmations work, where you say you, and you imagine when you say you kind of are looking from outside at you, and you will do this, you will do that work a lot. So try and play around with what kind of affirmations work for you. And for some people, affirmations don't work. They've actually found that for some people, self-affirmations just don't work. And for them, there's a different strategy called cognitive diffusion, where that's where you write letters to your God or letters to the universe, kind of saying, make this happen. This is my wish, make it happen, right? So those kinds of things where you kind of might want to figure out what strategy is working best for you in terms of manifesting things.
I do what did you say, self-diffusion? I do the letters. It's like prayers, pretty abstract concept of higher power, but I'm often just sending out little prayers of like, keep me in places I need to be with, people I need to be with, and like remove me, like get me out of the way, take myself out of the picture. It came to me through AA, that program, that recovery, but that's what worked for me. It was never affirmations. It was letting go of control and giving myself over, like removing myself from the picture and just trusting that something would kind of fill the space. But it's like, mind management. Like, call back to Corby Mitleid, who we interviewed a few weeks ago. She said, stepping back, recognizing how you feel about something, and then asking yourself what would happen if you stopped feeling that way about it.
That's powerful.
Yeah, and that is the emotion, right? It's who am I without feeling this consistently, or who am I without having to defend this about me, about myself? And I think that also has to do with invocation and evocation. With magic, is evocation is what do I want from the world, or what do I want to put out into the world, or the letter is to make sure that I stay with friends. The letter is all those things. Invocation is, how do I want to change my inner landscape? How do I want to feel consistently? What am I uprooting in myself that is causing a consistent damaging feeling that I don't like? And I think that's definitely also with Corby Mitleid, like the who would I be without this, is like, that's also a form of magic, is the invocation of like, who am I actually, or who do I decide to be, and who am I naturally, maybe.
Yeah. That's really cool, to think about. And it's interesting because you have that sense of self, but it's also the same network. Your default mode network is also the one that's projecting yourself into the future. So who do I want to be? So your current self is trying to kind of imagine your future self as to what do I want to be 5 years from now, or something like that. But at the same time, you're also fighting with your practical side of things, which is kind of trying to refuse the narrative. So if I say I want to be, this other being 5 years from now, you have you might have a part of your brain, your frontoparietal network, saying, hey, I don't believe that's going to happen. So you kind of have to balance out, or try and figure out which is going to win out, whether you're the sense of self or the logical, practical side of things, which is trying to always like dampen down your narratives.
And so with intuition, or like with magic, and with, I know that this new book that's coming out, is it a bit more, like you said, wood and wands, and are you looking into physical things, or is it still mainly neurology, or like associations, correspondences, that kind of thing, storytelling still, or like on a larger level than just tarot? Is that what the new book is?
Yeah, it's not tarot, it's not crystals, it's more about, so I was thinking about what is magic and magical thinking. So your circuits behind what makes you believe in something other than your physical realm or yourself. So that was the whole magical thinking aspect. Then it was into, if I want to create something or manifest something, I need to set an intention and almost visualize it in my head. So what are the circuits behind that? And like, how do we set intentions? What goes on in it, and what makes intentions powerful? And then is in any kind of magical ritual, you usually are creating these sacred spaces. You might draw a little circle, and you're kind of creating boundaries. And that was very fascinating to me, is to how even people who don't know that place is sacred will kind of be like, oh, there's something going on here. Like, so how does your brain frame that boundary and like, or reframe it on some level? It could just be like this little spot on the floor, but suddenly it becomes this sacred space. And then into sacred objects. So at that same time, I might have a pot, which was just a pot before, but suddenly it's a god now, or some kind of figurine, right? So how am I reimagining that and invoking power into it? So when in a lot of Hindu ceremonies, we have a pot of water, and then at the end of the ceremony, the water becomes sacred and consecrated, and they bless you with that, right? So that water assumes some energy. So how does your brain change the way it looks at this thing? Now it's suddenly consecrated offering. It's no longer wine, it's blood, those kinds of things. And then thinking about sigils, like when you're drawing sigils, how are we invoking a certain power to those sigils is something to think about. And all of that is leading to a ritual of some kind. And then so what goes on in a ritual and the spell work that's involved, like how do words have power, both in terms of invoking, as you mentioned, as well as when I'm saying something to you, how is it affecting you? So those are the kinds of things we're talking about. And then the last bit I talk about in the book is transcendence and dreaming. So like, how do you, move to that higher plane and what is the literature behind that? There's research that's gone on behind what makes you do lucid dreaming and those kinds of things, and how do you get visions of the future or visions of what's going to happen. So that's kind of what I wrap up with. Yeah.
That's amazing, because one of my favorite books is called Dream Yoga. I don't know if you've read that one. That's what my one tattoo is this a dream? Because he says to put it on a piece of paper and put it in your back pocket and always look at it throughout the day and ask yourself, is this a dream? Are the letters moving? And so the more you do that, the more your brain will remember it, more likely that your brain will remember it when you're dreaming. And so it kind of pulls you into this lucid state. And he goes into the Buddhist sect that does these rituals of sleeping, but staying awake while you sleep and going to like the core star of yourself. So that's incredible. I'm so glad you're going to be talking about, that's a pretty broad look at magic. And I for somebody like me who I'll find a lot of very specific books on very specific things, but I really want to kind of cover the gamut in maybe one way, like neurology or something like, give me all of it. Give me like a big chunk, not just like these little snippets of things, so they can see how they all kind of work together.
Yeah. It was a fun book. It was a difficult book because it became slightly autobiographical, which I was not expecting at all. I'm more and more, I'm realizing that I actually went to a religious school, which I didn't, when I was going through my education, I didn't realize it, but we used to chant like mantras every day, and we had fire rituals where we used to invoke the fire every week and make offerings, and so I went to I guess a religious, so I had to kind of talk a lot about rituals and stuff that I'd been raised with, which I was not expecting out of a book. So it was a little bit more difficult for me because a lot of personal stuff came out. So yeah.
Well, that's also why you wrote it in the first place, because it is so personal to you. It comes across as very personal to you. And that's what's always been so wonderful about talking to you, is that not only do you have this whole other asset of knowledge, but you were able to bridge it back to something that seems almost instinctual, or at least natural. I know that you and your sister had your time with tarot and the Gilmore Girls and stuff like that, but not everybody attaches to that kind of thing. Not everybody sees symbology and is compelled to read it, to understand it, or to like work with it. So we are coming up to the end of the hour, and I'm going to let Jessica also ask a question if she wants to, but like I wanted to bring this back full circle. If we're connecting to our intuition, if we're connecting to rituals, to, things that can, I think, help regulate our systems and our sense of environment, right? Because we're connecting so much now. We're connecting a bowl to a thought to water to, everything is that correspondence. Everything is kind of working together or is useful in some way.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think that gives us as human beings? What remedy is this? Or what do you think that this is adding to our lives on a larger level than just, I want this thing or I need this thing? Like it's as a practical, like just flowing aspect of our lives.
Yeah, I think one big thing it offers is a sense of preciousness, I think, about tangible things that you have around you. Like when an object assumes a sense of power, then you tend to value it more. When you're eating and you are eating that piece of food with a sense of intentionality, it just makes it tastier or adds value to it, which I think we are losing a lot with just the way we live, I think now. We're on social media, everything is so fleeting and ephemeral that I think that physicality and tangibility of these things is adding more value to your brain, because it is just saying, oh, this is something exciting. I need to take care of it. And I think the more intentionality we place onto those physical things is when we're going to take care of the earth. We're going to be much more cognizant of our environment or animals or pets and be much more supportive of everything around us. Maybe I feel like that's how we were meant to live, and we've kind of walked away from it a little bit. People talk about your body is your temple, but how much have you really paid attention to your body on a certain level? So that's kind of what I'm hoping this emerges, I think. Yeah.
I don't think I could have asked for a better answer. Thank you. I love the earth and I want everyone to feel connected. And I think that's amazing. Thank you.
And that's all from me. I mostly just have shower thoughts running through my head, but no more questions.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Siddarth, for taking the time to hang out with us again. And I really would love to have you back on once your book comes out, if you'd be so willing to do that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Thank you for inviting me. It's great. Yeah. Thank you so much.